Zimbabweans heading to the polls today. Very important, of course. They're going to be voting for their next president. Opposition leader Nelson Chamisa has assured his supporters of victory, but I feel like that happened last time as well. He says incumbent President Emmerson Mnangagwa is running scared. Now, could these elections be the one that brings an end to Zanu-PF's 43-year rule? Should it actually happen? Is it good for the country? Let's get the thoughts of Advocate Sipho Mantula from the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Relations. Sipho, it's good to have you back on ENC. You're always so very kind with your time. Let's just start. First of all, we'll talk about your expectations of an outcome. Once again, and I feel like this is always the story with Zimbabwe elections, there's been intimidation, there's been accusations by the opposition. They haven't been allowed to campaign properly. I feel like we've been here before. How do you feel?
Refreshing morning and Jumbo Africa Gareth, even to your viewers. I think what we have been going through, it is the nature of elections in Africa where you have a pre-violence, you have those tensions. But what I've picked up from Zimbabwe is that they have the systems, they have what they call the multi-party liaison committees, that whenever you have crisis, whenever you have violence, whenever you have intimidation, removal of posters, they must use those systems that they do have. And this is for the first time, since their 2013 election. So we don't know, maybe the media doesn't report it, but as you have said, this is the tension that goes before the elections. Now it is the voting time, Gareth. One will say that maybe we have moved from that pre-election campaign period. We are now in the voting process. As you are aware that in the last 50 minutes, they've opened their voting stations. That's where you will understand that post-elections, the counting also, you must understand, also triggers the tensions among political supporters of different political parties. But it is important that there is a code of conduct that all political parties must abide with in any election in an African continent.
And what is the temperature that you're reading as far as which way this election could go? I know it's never a good thing to start calling elections. It's not what I'm asking. I'm suggesting, how are you feeling since the last elections, what the population of Zimbabwe could want? Do they want stable and steady, although not a great government, or are they looking for change?
Gareth, what I've seen, change, it is painful, but change has been there in a sense that when you look at two candidates, Mnangagwa, Chamisa, they are all talking about economic recovery of Zimbabwe. Chamisa goes further on social justice, but Mnangagwa strengthened on fighting corruption. And secondly, as we look at these elections, we'll also see at the numbers, we have 6.5 million voters that are eligible to vote, but we know that you'll be having this issue of rural and urban voting patterns. And you might find that incumbents, Zanu-PF might also get more support from rural, and in the urban you might find opposition parties might get the support of the youth. But if you look at the tensions also around the change, remember that this is the 9th elections of Zimbabwe since it was liberated from the British colonial master in 1980. So it is important for us to understand that these elections are also under the watch of international observer missions, whether from the EU or AU or SADC. So it is important for us to have faith. For me, Gareth, I am trying to say, let us be optimistic. Yes, pessimism, it is there that elections in Africa doesn't result in tangible change. Hence, there is voter apathy. But their previous elections, the voter turnout was very high. And secondly, I think the challenge this year is the low candidates of women. Out of 11 presidential candidates, of only one woman, Elizabeth Valerie, compared to the 4 women who were even contesting in 2018. And you'll understand 2018 came from the military coup or not military coup of 2017. So you'll understand dynamics have changed, but that's where I see that temperature-wise, climate, we have not picked up what I will say to you, violence that has been so rampant like the previous elections that have been in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, and thank heavens for that as well, because those years, those elections really were something awful to see on television. Many of us weren't there in person, but I've spoken to journalists who were. Sipho, I want to ask you just in closing as well, when it comes to you putting on your international affairs hat for just a second, South Africa as a country, we have to watch what happens in Zimbabwe very, very very closely, especially considering the possible expansion of BRICS. Those countries are going to look at us, not just our internal politics, but how we engage our neighbors as well. How do we view Zimbabwe, even if there was a change? What would we expect from them?
No, correctly, Gareth. I think if you look at democratization of the region and the role of BRICS, one of the aims of BRICS is also issues around political, economic and security of the BRICS countries. South Africa also, we are an immediate neighbor of Zimbabwe. We have our embassy in Harare. We have been engaging on this issue of Zimbabwe mediation process. We have many Zimbabweans in this country. So we have to be concerned. But I think at an international level, Zimbabwe went to Russia Africa Summit. It has engaged already on its own economic recovery plan. I think for us, South Africa is the issue of solidarity, but it's also the issue of reminding them that it is better for those who are here for many years to consider going back home to go and rebuild Zimbabwe, because it is very important. We talk of integration, but at the same time, we are having domestic challenges within the BRICS countries. But within the BRICS countries, I think it is important for them to support Zimbabwe on issues of economic recovery and also on the democratization and the issues of social justice. And finally, Gareth, I think access to basic necessities, healthcare, education and energy. Electricity has been challenged in Zimbabwe, and I think at an international forum of the BRICS, we know that the energy issues have been the center of how do we assist African countries to deal with the energy crisis that they are going through. And also corruption, Gareth, we can't run away from corruption. That most of the states that come out of liberation, they get into corruption, and that also derails, frustrates development of their own state.
Of course it does. It has that rollover effect, that knock-on effect, even unintended, perhaps, of their neighbouring countries as well. Sipho, it's always good to talk to you, and I appreciate your time. Hope